offshore being driven to Australia, where the prospects are brighter and their work is respected. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given what we've listened to in the last half hour, I think it necessary to refute a number of the issues that I think have been raised slightly erroneously. We should remember this bill or this issue arose from legislation put in place in 2006. So it goes back quite some time. So that's the first point I want to raise, Mr. Chair. I want to briefly talk about the SOP introduced by Raymond Ho. It in my view, is clearly impractical. It doesn't achieve anything other than to give some money back to an organisation or a group of people in an organisation who will then have to pay it back to the organisation for the organisation to continue to function. And we heard the Greens earlier thinking it would be a great idea for the government just to pay the difference. Well, we could just pay the difference on a whole lot of issues in this country, but we would run out of money. That clearly is not going to work. The plumbers... we will use the asset money productively. The Plumbers, Gasfitters and Drainlayers amendment bill, Mr. Chair, is put in place to allow the plumbers, gasfitters and drainlayers to act in the same manner as any other industry good body would act. It's put in place to protect those members from the activities, I guess, of what we might call cowboys. And I think it's logical that any organisation or any industry-based organisation should be able to operate in that manner and operate with the protection of legislation put in place by this House. That is what this bill does. It cleans up a messy situation created in 2006, and sure, there have been complaints to the Regulations Review Committee. Those complaints have been dealt with one way or another. There's surely been a complaint to the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman made a call on this, and in the process of making that call, he suggested there was a fine line between what was right and wrong and what was the best way to deal with this. He thought that the plumbers, gasfitters and drainlayers were doing the best they could with a slightly, poor piece of legislation. It's not an attack or an opportunity for us to attack an industry body. The course of this bill certainly shouldn't provide that opportunity. I think that the plumbers, gasfitters and drainlayers are doing the best they can, as the Ombudsman indeed said, with a piece of legislation that certainly isn't perfect. We've got to understand that this board collects around about $600,000 a year. So for them to be dealing with or putting levies in place of the magnitude that were mentioned earlier in this House of $11,000 to $14,000 a year per member is quite ridiculous. So the next issue I think we need to refute is the fact that the numbers of these people are dropping as a result of this legislation or as a result of the poor management of this board. That clearly isn't the case, Mr. Chair. We've only got to look at the record of our building industry over the past 7 or 8 years, and we'll see why the numbers are dropping. Quite clearly, the numbers of all sorts of professionals in this area have dropped in that time. They've dropped for very good reason. They drop because there's no work. And the other thing that happens in an industry like this, which happens frequently in all sorts of industry, is that there's a significant amount of efficiency comes in and new methods arise, and obviously that's played a large part in the changes in this industry. So the opportunity that this bill puts in place is firstly to give the plumbers, gasfitters and drainlayers legislation that supports their industry good body, which allows them to contest and I guess investigate unregistered or unlicensed people practising in the industry. And I don't think, and as one of the members of the opposition just mentioned earlier, this used to come under the Ministry of Health, this organisation, for very good reason. That's why we need to have strict legislation or legislation and strict management of the opportunity for registered people to be operating in it. And as my counterpart or compatriot, Mr. Sabin, says, gas is not the safest thing to be operating with in our houses, and certainly needs to be regulated very well there. So, Mr Chair, I don't want to dwell on this much longer, but I think there's very good reason for this piece of legislation to be put in place. I don't think there was a suitable alternative to it, Mr Chair.
Ian McKelvey.
I don't think there was a suitable alternative for it, and I think that the Minister has done a good job bringing this to the fore. I just want to say one last thing. All organisations are going to have internal disputes. All organisations are going to have disagreements as to how they should run. This legislation will give this organisation the opportunity to put in place or put itself in order, I guess, put its house in order, and to manage the process that it needs to manage around the licensing and the control of those licences in a proper manner. So, Mr Chair, I think that aside from not supporting the SOP, which I think clearly won't work, I'm all in favour of this bill proceeding. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you very much.